today what we're going to talk about is a couple of things that we're kind of bringing all together so we understand our next steps here in algebra. First thing we're going to talk about is greatest common factor. Then we're going to talk about a different way of applying the distributive property. And then factoring. Factoring out numbers, also kind of a distributive property type thing. And then finally, solving using the zero product property. So there's a lot to get to in these notes, so let's get started. All right, so greatest common factor. You've learned this before in the past. So let's go ahead and take 12a squared b squared c and 18ab to the third, and let's factor those out completely. Now, if you remember how to factor a number, we would go ahead and we have 12a squared b squared c, and to factor it out completely, we find all of the prime numbers. We're doing prime factoring. So the prime factors of 12 are 2 times 2 times 3. All right, 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 3 is 12. And then the factors of a squared are a. And then the factors of b squared are b, and of course the factor of c is c. So I went ahead and I factored this entire monomial out completely. So now what I want to do is I want to factor out 18ab to the third. So I have 18ab to the third. And that's going to equal, let's see, the factors of 18 are 2 times 3 times 3, 2 times 9, and then we have 1a, and then I have 3 b's, b, b, b. And in order to find the greatest common factor of these two terms, what I'm going to do is I'll match them up. Let's see, I have a 2, I have a 3, okay? The 2 and 3 aren't in common, so I don't circle those. I have an a, I have a b, and another b. So my greatest common factor for 12a squared b squared c and 18ab to the third would end up being 6ab squared. Okay, go ahead and try to figure out what the greatest common factor would be of 4x to the third, 20x squared, and 24x. Now let's move on to the distributive property. Now what we've been doing up to this point with the distributive property is we've been doing something like this. You don't have to write this down, but we have 2 times x squared plus 3, and we multiply 2 times the x squared, 2 times the 3, so we end up with 2x squared plus 6. Okay, that's what we've been doing with the distributive property up to this point. But what we're actually going to do with the distributive property now is kind of work in the reverse. We're pulling out the greatest common factor of 4x squared and 36, and then we're going to kind of do the reverse distributive property. So if I look at 4x squared and 36, I'm going to write number 3 here. Okay, the greatest common factor in both of those numbers would be 4. And I'm going to multiply that to x squared plus 9. All right, there's nothing else I can pull out of that x squared plus 9, but if I multiply 4 to both of those, I will get 4x squared plus 36. All right, same with number 4. Not that big of a deal. I would end up with 4, and it would just, the difference would be x squared minus 9. Another way you could actually write it, which I would not suggest doing this, but we want to be able to think of this because there might come a time when you might have to do this, would be negative 4. I'll pull out a negative 4, and it would be negative x squared plus 9. If I multiplied negative 4 to the terms inside of the parentheses, I would end up with 4x squared minus 36. Okay, I just want you to see that as an example because we might have to do some number maneuvering, I guess you could say, when further down in our notes, so we might need to be able to understand how that can be changed. Okay, next. I have 5x to the third, 25x squared, and 30x. That's number 5. So really all I'm going to do is pull out, the only thing I can really pull out of there is 5x. And I would multiply that to x squared minus 5x minus 6. And for number 6, I could go ahead and pull out, the only thing I can pull out of that is going to be a 5x squared. All right, I have 5x squared, and I would multiply that to 9x squared minus 4. Again, if we needed to, we could go ahead and make that a negative 5x squared multiplied to a negative 9x squared plus 4. Just a way of looking at it in case we had to do something like that in the future. Okay, number 7. Let's see. For number 7, I would go ahead and pull out the 5n. 5n, and that would be multiplied to n squared minus 4. And number 8, let's see, for number 8, I would go ahead and pull out, the only thing I can really pull out of that is going to be 3. So it's going to be 3 times 9w cubed minus 16. That's all we can do to that problem. That's the greatest common factor between 27 and 48. Number 9. All right, finally number 9 here. Let's see, I'm going to pull out a 4x, and I'm going to multiply that to x squared minus 9. All right, go ahead and try to do 10 through 14 on your own. Pause the video and work on 10 through 14. Okay, now what we want to move on to is factoring by grouping, okay? So what we really did with that distributive property is we did factoring. All right, and what we're going to do, we're kind of putting together the whole distributive property, the whole greatest common factor, and we're putting it all together right now. So if I have number 15, all right, and it's x cubed plus 2x squared plus 3x plus 6. Now it says factoring by grouping. So what that means is I'm going to group x cubed and 2x squared. I'm going to group, remember we have that associative property, it says we can do this, 3x plus 6. Now, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out. So now what I want to factor out, just like we did in our previous problems, is I'm going to pull out the greatest common factor here, which is x squared. And that would be times x plus 2. And here with this group, I'm going to pull out a 3. That would be a plus 3 times x plus 2. Now, if you take a look and see, okay, what we've just done is we've pulled out our greatest common factors there, but now what we end up having is that x plus 2, that's our greatest common factor for these two terms. So what we can do now is pull that out. So I end up with x plus 2 times x squared plus 3. And that's how we factor by grouping. Okay, so let's go ahead and try number 16. I'm probably going to be doing some erasing, so if you need to pause and write down what I wrote down, please do. I'll do 16 here, and then I'll probably erase and work on 17, 18, and 19 above. Okay, so for number 16, let's see, x cubed plus 4x squared plus 8x plus 32. First thing I want to do is group. Next thing I want to do is do just like we did on the previous page and pull out our greatest common factor here. So I have x squared, and that's going to be times x plus 4. Here, my greatest common factor would be 8 times x plus 4. Here I end up with that x plus 4 again, so I'm going to end up with x plus 4 times x squared plus 8. Done. Okay, moving on to number 17. All right, I'm going to erase these. Make sure you get them. Pause if you need to. For number 17, let's see. I have x cubed minus 2x squared minus 9x plus 18. Okay. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to go ahead and group just like we have. Okay. And when I pull out, let's see, I have x squared times x minus 2. And if I pull this out, let's see, I'll pull 9 out. 9 times x plus 2. Now remember on the previous page, I was showing you examples of how we might need to switch things around. Okay, this happens to be one of those times. Okay, so because if you look, I have x minus 2 and I have x plus 2. That's not going to work for us. Okay, so what I'm going to do before I factor this out, I'm going to go ahead and do this. And if it happens, and if you can see it before it happens, great. If you don't, then you can always go back and fix it. Generally, if I see a grouping has a minus sign and the other grouping has a plus sign, I know that there's some changes that I'm going to have to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to a plus. And if I change this sign to a plus, then that means it's going to be a negative 9x plus a negative 18. Now I'm going to go ahead and factor out a negative 9. And that negative 9 would be x minus 2. Now it works for us, okay? You see how we have to do some maneuvering to the numbers. We haven't changed them. We just used our rules for adding the inverse, and we went ahead and made it be able to work for us. Now I have x squared minus 9 times x minus 2. And you might be saying, well, you put that x minus 2 first before. It doesn't matter. Remember, we have the commutative property of multiplication, which tells us that the order really doesn't matter in order to get this done. Okay, so that was number 18. And for number 19, let's see here. Let's see, we have x to the third plus 3x squared minus 36x plus 108. This one's pretty easy peasy if you ask me. Here's my grouping. I have x squared, x plus 3, and I'll leave my minus sign and I'll have 36 times x plus 3. So we have x plus 3 times x squared minus 36. All right, go ahead and try the next set of questions on your own and see how you do on those. Pause the video if you need to. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the zero product property. Now this is pretty cool. I mean, I think it's pretty cool. You might think it's not, but I have 2d plus 6 in parentheses times 3d minus 15 equals 0. So this is what it means. Remember our zero property of multiplication? That's probably the one property that we all thought was the easiest because it's like anything times 0 is 0. Well, that holds true, but what we're doing with this now is we're saying, okay, either 2d plus 6 equals 0 or 3d minus 15 equals 0. Okay, we are trying to find the zeros of this problem. Okay, our x-intercepts. Remember those that we had a hard time with before? So let's see, 2d equals negative 6. That should be a 2d, not a 2,6. 2d equals negative 6, so d would equal negative 3. That's one of our zeros. Or 3d equals 15, or d equals 5. So our zeros for this one would either be negative 3 or positive 5. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at problem number 26. I'm going to erase this, pause if you need to. Okay, so c squared equals 3c. Well, that doesn't seem to work. I don't have a 0, so this is what I'm going to do. C squared minus 3c equals 0. Now I have a problem that I can work with. So in order to do this, I need to factor out. I'm going to say c times c minus 3 equals 0. So I have one of two things. Either c equals 0 or c minus 3 equals 0. So my 1 0 for this problem will be 0. My other one would be c equals positive 3. The other one would be 0 or 3. Okay, go ahead and try and do 27 and 28 on your own, and good luck. Thank you.